Good morning. Good morning. It is 9 o'clock and it's our regular scheduled board meeting, March 16th, 2021, and I call the meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, with that, first item on the agenda is the approval of the February 23rd minutes. Is there any changes, corrections, or additions? Hearing none, all approve, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, next we'll go to the public hearing, to vacate a portion of Drakey Street, and this is presented by Craig Erdman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Background. On November 10th, 2020, the Public Works Office received a petition signed by 7 landowners within the vicinity of Grady Street requesting that a portion of Grady Street be vacated. The petition was... Okay. Okay. Is that better? All right. The petition was accompanied by a cash bond as required. On December 15th, 2020, the Franklin County Board of Commissioners, by resolution number 2020-284, ordered the county engineer to report on the possible vacation of Grady Street so that the board may consider the usefulness of such road. The purpose of this public hearing is to consider the report of the county engineer, together with any evidence for or objection against such vacation and abandonment, in accordance with RCW 36.87 and Chapter 12.08 of the County Code. Per Chapter 12.08 of the County Code, a unanimous vote of the Board of County Commissioners is required to approve the vacation. The board is not bound by the recommendation of the county engineer. Findings. After review of the petition and operations of the road, it is my opinion that the portion of the right-of-way on Grady Street under consideration should be retained by the county for the following reasons. Water and sewer services are in close proximity to that area. Water services are available on Road 48, while sewer services are available on Road 44. Franklin PUD and Charter Cable already utilize the easement for services. The extension of Grady Street would be a logical connection between Road 44 and Road 48. Following from the above, vacating the existing right-of-way could negatively impact future development in the area. If the board wishes to move forward with the vacation, a resolution has been provided. May I answer any questions that you have?
Questions, commissioners?
Over the years, there's been some discussion of a possible future overpass that would be within a block or so of this location. Do you think that a future overpass there would be aided or hindered in any way by this proposed vacation?
No, I don't believe it would be.
So if you had an overpass there and you wanted to move traffic expeditiously to and from that overpass, would more or less feeders matter?
I think more would be what we would want to bring it to that.
Is this potentially a feeder running parallel to the freeway that would be a collector to a future overpass?
Possibly.
Okay. I didn't see it in the read aheads. Did the applicants give specific reasons for their interest in vacation? I saw the surveys and I saw the descriptions of what they wanted vacated, but did anybody identify a special need or purpose or condition?
No, I did not see that in their application, though I may have missed it. And they did not communicate that to us otherwise.
Commissioner Mullen?
No, I have no questions at this point.
So Craig, on this, they're only asking to vacate the right of way.
Correct.
So the road will still be there.
The current road as it stands, yes.
So that the water, the sewer, phone that is running in that right of way, how, if we vacate that and they dig in there and disrupt it, they're responsible, correct?
Correct. However, I do not believe that city water or sewer exists in the portion that is
That is
going to be
mentioned.
vacated or is being requested to be vacated.
Could it be added at a later date?
No. Only utilities which exist inside the area to be vacated can be accommodated by the language of the easement in RCW 3687.
Because it was mentioned in that, what you just read out, the water and the sewer, but it's not in the right of way is what you're telling me.
Correct.
Okay.
Craig, this area is inevitably going to be annexed. I think we all recognize. Can you remind us what the city's position was on this request?
The city came out against the vacation, largely for the same reasons that I provided the board.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion?
You need to close the hearing. You need to open and close the hearing. This is a public hearing.
So I didn't open it at the beginning. I called out an open public meeting, so now we open it up for public comment?
Yeah, you open the public hearing, just
Okay.
you take public comment.
Okay, is there any public comment on this issue?
Mr. Chairman, I think for the record, you might be protecting everybody's interests by stating that we've had board comments and now it's time to formally open the public hearing in which the public may give testimony.
Okay, I thought I did that, but we have now opened this for open public comment. Is there any public comment on this hearing? Is there anybody on the phone, Keith?
No.
How long do we wait?
I think you can close the public hearing.
Okay, we close the public hearing. Now asking the Board of Commissioners, is there a motion?
As stated in the read ahead, no motion is required if it's the preference of the board to not vacate the,
So hearing no motion, then there is no vacate of right-of-way. Okay. Moving on. Adoption of the Franklin County Building Code and Fire Code. Nicole? Or Derek? Derek's here. Okay.
Miss Stickney had a scheduling conflict, so she wasn't able to attend.
Derek, if you would speak real clearly
Sorry.
into the microphone, thank you.
That's right, take this off too.
Yeah.
Miss Stickney was not able to attend today. So. Okay. Yeah, this is, so it's supposed to be about every 3-year cycle. The state reviews, updates, not just the state, but the ICC, which is the International Code Council. They're the ones that produce the building code.
are we skipping the CUP?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I skipped the CUP. This is the open recorded hearing, conditional use permit,
Okay.
the CUP SEPA. Sorry, I jumped ahead there. I got off my schedule here.
This is a, no, where is my? Doesn't even have to be. I apologize. Normally, this would be a closed record, but there was some information that we received in advance of the, just the day before, the day of the hearing that changed the, why am I not able to find this? I do, if you're not going in the right area, sorry. So normally, when a conditional use permit comes before the board, it is a closed record hearing. However, the day of the public hearing before the planning commission, staff was notified by the applicant that the head count that they were proposing was significantly different than what they put in the application. Staff was under the understanding and had prepared all notifications based on the idea that it would be a grand total of 6,500 head of cattle at the site. We were notified the day of the hearing that it would actually be an additional 6,500 and that the grand total would be 10,000 head of cattle at the facility. Based on that, and because of the way that the public hearing process works when we're on WebEx, you have to pre-register, and staff in coordination with the applicant felt that it would be more prudent for us to present this as an open hearing, allow people to provide comment on that actual number of 10,000 head. And that's why it's open. So we basically extended out. We also modified the SEPA determination, which is not unusual, based on new information. We reran the SEPA determination as a mitigated determination of non-significance as opposed to the initial determination of non-significance.
Excuse me,
So,
Derek.
yeah.
With that as a preamble, this is a quasi judicial item.
Correct.
And since there's been no discussion of it, I'll take the opportunity at this time to just remind that if anyone on the board has had any conversations with the applicant on this matter, that would likely violate that quasi judicial requirement. And so I'm just declaring that I don't have any ex parte communications with the applicant or anyone associated with this particular project, and would ask that my fellow commissioners identify if they've had any such contact.
I've had no contact on this matter.
Thank you.
No contact on this matter.
Great. Thank
So
you
I
very
think
much.
we're all aware of that, and if we would have had it, we would have mentioned it.
Well, actually, all due respect, Mr. Chair, that's part of the requirement in opening this is to identify the nature of it and to request disclosures, if any. But I think we're good now, and I appreciate the response. It gives the public confidence in the process.
So this is a dairy, is as opposed to a feedlot, but as it's a feedlot for a dairy is the proposal. So the property is located to the north of Pepiot Road. The specific address or siting location of the site doesn't have an address. It's all part of the Cooley Heights Dairy Properties. It's just in the back about, say it's approximately a mile or two from the actual where their main office is and in that main facility right there on Pepiot. This is way in the northeast section of that overall. They own quite a few properties. But it's on parcel numbers 109, 270, 022, And then also, I apologize, 109-220-022 does have an address of 2270 Joyce Road. That's because there's some structures there. It's actually another kind of feedlot area. This is the general vicinity, the highlighted section. It actually, okay, the arrow doesn't show up. So we have the subject area, that's the primary location, but as you can see, it actually will drop down into that next parcel to the south a little bit, almost parallel to that retention pond is kind of what the mock-ups show. And this is a proximity, this entire area is the Cooley Flats Dairy property, and where those pin marks are is where this proposal is being located. So up there will be 6,500 head. There's already approximately 3,500 head in the lower sections, up to 6,500 head. It's very rare that they start out that way. They usually go for a total limit, and then they'll build as the market allows. The area is the comp plan designation is ag. It's AP 20 zoning. As stated, it's a expansion of the existing feedlot by 6,500 head for up to 10,000 total. Both parcels add up to approximately 635 acres. About 30 to 50 acres of both parcels are to be used. The existing feedlot that was down in that corner there, that's approximately 45 to 50 acres. Here again is a close-up. The green lines kind of represent the channels. I'm not sure what they're, the feeding and the fencing and stuff like that. There are no real permanent structures being proposed as far as like buildings, except for maybe small storage buildings, those types of facilities. It's mostly fencing and feeding troughs. There's some shots of what it could look like. I mean, this is based on what they have already. So it's going to be kind of a replication of what we're seeing in these pictures here and the 3 pictures there. Just another shot. There's the notice of land use. So this kind of took 2 phases. Staff was notified agencies in December 10th. Notices out to the landowners within 1 mile. The property was posted approximately on the December 18th. The original SEPA determination of non-significance was issued on the 10th of December 2020. Public notice was posted as well as and that was all done on the 10th. And then a public hearing was held before the Franklin County Planning Commission on January 5th, 2021. I'll get used to saying that eventually. As stated, due to disparity in the advertised information regarding the cattle head count provided prior to the hearing, information provided during the public hearing, and because the hearing was arranged only to accept remote testimony. In other words, you had to pre-certify or pre-register. So like this new information coming out in the middle of the hearing, folks that may have had an interest based on that information didn't really have an opportunity to comment. That's why staff, in consultation with the applicant, determined that we would have an open hearing. We re-noticed that information. So on February 25th, the agencies were re-notified about the change in the SEPA determination and the new numbers. Same with folks being notified within 1 mile. Again, the sign was still up, so it stayed up during the whole. And the way that signage works is somebody sees a sign, they call us and go, "Hey, I saw this sign, number 6, what's that?" And then we explain to the folks, this is what the project and the proposal is. Revised mitigated SEPA determination of non-significance, otherwise known as an MDNS, was also issued on February 25th.
So like there's new information coming out in the middle of the hearing, folks that may have had an interest based on that information, didn't really have an
It's just a feedback here somewhere on our system.
Oh, that's me. Okay. That was weird.
Deja vu.
And then public notice of the change was also sent out on the 25th. So with these types of facilities, there's always fly and odor control. That is not, we don't manage that. That's done through the Department of Ecology, I believe. The nutrient management plan is done through the Department of Agriculture. So there's an existing one for the 3,500 head, but they'll have to update that to include and modify it for the new addition, should this be approved. And then the area does have record, or at least there's evidence of Aboriginal activity. Therefore, they'll have to do a archaeological survey on that site before they can do construction. And that involves hiring either working with DAHP or hiring a archaeologist to kind of go out there and double check. If they see stuff, they'll either remove it, encapsulate it in place, or make some other arrangement regarding it. So the mitigation measures, they'll have to, well, they're doing this now, the conditional use permit, they have to apply for that. They'll have to get a letter from the Conservation District to allow for a deviation because of the proximity. I want to say it's, I apologize, I don't remember the exact numbers, but within a few miles of each other, there's only so many head of cattle that are allowed. It also has to do with the way the winds blow and various other things to try to mitigate the odors that come off the facility and to disperse that throughout instead of consolidating it into one area. That's between the applicant and the Conservation District as to how that would be played out. So they'll have to, as usual, comply with all the conditions that we have as listed. I can go through these if you want. They're in the staff report. They're also in the slide. So they'll, it's a pretty big deal. The reason why it was initially issued an MD or a DNS as opposed to an MDNS is just because basically all these requirements are the same requirements that any feedlot of that size would have to meet under state law or local law. They're not asking or being required to do anything above and beyond what would normally be required. That's kind of a gray area in SEPA as to whether a DNS or an MDNS. But that's MDNS. It's more specifically accurate due to the fact that there are mitigations. It's just that all those mitigations are required under existing law. There is a retention pond, but we didn't receive any comments or concerns with regard to that. They will be required to ensure that any waste or anything like that stays out of that retention pond. There's domestic sewer via an existing septic tank, but again, it would be limited use due to the fact that there are no residents and again, there may be porta potties or something like that, but it's at this point not proposed to have any permanent restroom facilities, nor would there be a need because staff doesn't really hang out there. They'll go out, they'll check the animals, they'll feed the animals, water them, whatnot. There are no wetlands. What this is showing, well, you'll see it in the next. There's a frequently flooded area. There's floodplains. That's primarily due to a dry gully that under certain rain events could collect water and flow through that area. but it's a 100-year flood event. There are some areas that are 15% or less slopes. Due, again, the lack of structures being built, it's not a high concern. And they're outside of the actual footprint of the proposed area. There are indications of, I don't know how to say this, so forgive me, Ferruginous hawks, which is considered threatened. Again, that can be determined. They'll have to do an analysis to make sure that there's no nest or anything like that in the area. And if there are, they will have to mitigate that. So, like I said, there is a floodplain. This blue indicates that canal, or it's not a canal, it's just a gully, a dry gully most of the time. The suggested motion is that the Franklin County Board of Commissioners adopt the 6 findings of fact and 21 conditions of approval as detailed in the staff report and approved case file, CUP 2020-04. The proposed use, here's some, I'm not going to go through all 21 of them, but again, well, I will go through the 6 findings of fact, but the proposed use is in the AP 20 zoning district, is in accordance with goals and policies of the county development regulations and the applicable comp plan. The proposal will not adversely affect public infrastructure. It will be constructed, maintained, and operated to be in harmony with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity. It's just a bunch, there's nothing out there except for he's got feed corn and things like that, again, for the facility. But there's no houses around there other than his house that I'm aware of. There might be a couple farm, housing units out there, but it's pretty isolated. But you do on occasion smell it from 395. So the proposal will be constructed, maintained, and operated to be in harmony. I already said that. Sorry. Again, location and height of structures, site design, it's not going to affect the ability of other people to do the same thing or impair values. This is right to farm county, and it's a big farm facility, commercial farming operation or dairy operation. And the proposal will not be more objectionable. It's already producing some fumes, I guess you could say, occasionally. It's been doing that for quite a while, and I don't know if this would raise or increase it, but that's part of that conservation plan where they have to negotiate or discuss with how they're going to address any potential increases in fumes or stuff. And due to the fact that they have certain mitigations and requirements, it will not endanger the public's health, safety, or general welfare. So again, these are conditions of approval. Like I said, on this one, I'm not going through all 21 of them. So they've got to use the proper erosion and sediment control practices while they're building it to keep stuff from it going into the retention pond or entering any other surface water, but there's really nothing else out there. An MDNS has been issued. So like I said, they'll have various mitigations they have to implement. If those are not, then some of the licensing agencies won't issue the license. They have to meet those standards to maintain that head count as well. Same thing with the nutrient management plan will need to be updated to reflect the new count and location. And that's what the NMP is the nutrient management plan. So they did one in 2018. It just needs to be updated to reflect the current situation or the proposed situation. Odor and fly control plan is required. They, at all times, shall comply with the necessary federal and state standards for dairy operations. They must comply with the standards of the health district. And before construction, they'll need to do that archaeological survey to make sure that there's nothing there that we don't know about. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions, commissioners?
This is listed as an open record hearing, and I've been listening intently and going through my notes, and I don't recall if we opened this as a hearing or if we're still in staff comments.
Right now, we're going to hear from commissioners and we'll open it up to the public as soon as the commissioners get done commenting, and we'll have another commissioner comment after. If there's no,
Okay, so Derek,
Questions?
I've got a few questions. I just want to make sure
okay,
which phase we're in here. The first question, we've got other dairies in the region. How would this one fully built out to the terms of this CUP, how would it compare size-wise with other dairies in the region? Any idea?
It's going to be one of the bigger ones. Whether it's the biggest, I can't say off the top of my head, but I'm almost positive in the top two.
We do have other large dairies operating in the region successfully, though, correct?
Correct. And this one's not small as it sits right now. So
Right.
it's a pretty big one.
Right. And to your knowledge, have we had any significant issues or concerns from those other dairy operations that frankly are not as isolated as this one?
Not that we're aware of. There's some other issues regarding complaints of, folks moving cattle around, but that's not a dairy situation, and it,
Right.
so.
So the line of questioning is predicated on having some background with dairies in the west side of the state that have been under the gun from various groups, everything from nutrient plans to runoff into salmon-bearing streams to a whole bunch of other issues that I don't see existing in this part of the state, which I think makes it a great place for dairies. Any thought on that?
When initiated, the original CUP for this proposal, I can't remember exactly when, but back when it was initiated, City of Connell had some comments and some concerns. They were also re-noticed, so they were notified and they didn't provide any comments. So our interpretation of that is, though concerned initially, it does not seem to be affecting really the City of Connell. And I've noticed that as well, that no comments from MESA, nobody provided any real comments, except for, again, when we found out that there's a little bit of a discrepancy in the numbers, we did receive a comment going, hey, that's not what I thought you were doing here. And that's what kind of helped kick this off.
And that comment was just a passing remark, or was that
It was a
submitted?
neighbor,
Okay.
and he said he didn't have really any pointed issues with it, just more a matter of process. You
Okay,
said
so it's-
this. and-
So it's new information. It was not submitted as a concern.
Correct.
Okay. Conditional use permits obviously allow for activities that aren't automatically allowed in a given zone.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't because those activities are inherently incompatible. It's just because those activities might be incompatible in that zone and deserve some additional scrutiny. Is that a fair
Correct.
description?
Yeah.
Okay, and conditional use permits sometimes are issued to individuals and sometimes they're attached to the parcels themselves. This one's proposed to be attached to the individual, their heirs and assigns, which gives it perpetuity.
Correct.
I'm curious, if the intent was perpetuity, why not attach it to the parcels instead of the individual, such that transitions, heirs and assigns taking it over would already be in position to operate?
It's an opportunity.
I mean, I don't have a real heartburn either way. I'm just
it's-
curious because, we kind of bend over backward to try and support ag in this county, and that would make it a little bit easier for their heirs and assigns. It's
Usually,
not essential.
yeah, usually what that requires is they provide us notification that it's switched hands. us being the planning department.
Okay.
We review it. And
Well,
if there's a concern,
That's
we'll trigger
that's a
something.
situation that I could see why you might do it that way. Okay, in the conditions of approval, there's a couple of them, 7 and 10, that speak to water.
Mhm.
And we'll start with 10 first. We probably all remember, or many of us anyway, the Easter Day versus Five Corners Family Farm suit that went to the state Supreme Court and looked at the ecology exemptions for groundwater withdrawals. And that was the case that clearly ruled that in the matter of stock watering, it was an unlimited usage. And so in this case, excuse me, are there other major aquifer users close by that might be affected the way they were with the Easter Day Five Corners situation?
Not that we're aware of. And again, state agencies were notified and they did not indicate as such.
They didn't indicate an issue? Okay. And then in item 7, and I don't recall the exact language, but I can pull it up here.
Regarding.
By the way, I see we went from 4 to 5 to 9, but that's okay. We came back to 6 and 7. I think it's
Oh,
just
no.
just a typo.
We got
It's
numbering
all right.
issues.
The information's there. That's what matters. In item 7, it says the facility must provide domestic drinking water by a public water supply in accordance with WAC 246-291. So I guess I'm kind of wondering, who's that public water supply serving, and why is that any different than a domestic well that the landowner might use for their own water and also use for water for their workers and employees? As long as it's a recognized well by the health department and tested, why would we state that it has to be a public water supply? And I guess my real question is a public water supply any different than an approved domestic water well approved by the health district?
Frankly, I believe that's a typo.
Because you could be putting a huge
This-
Group B water requirement on the landowner without even knowing it.
Right. No, I believe upon review of this language, I think that this is something that was left. It
I
shouldn't
think
be
that's
there.
a fragment from an old package or something.
Yeah, because just as you said, this is not a public water facility. I mean, obviously they need to provide potable water for the dairy animals to drink.
I don't even
But
know
it's
that
not
they
a
have to do
public-
that, but they do
well-
for their workers.
Right. And again, that facility, they don't hang out there. They
Right.
could easily bring, like the 5-gallon igloo of water, like a construction crew does, those types of things.
Yeah,
That's-
I'm just concerned that if you get a number of structures and a number of workers, pretty soon Department of Health at the state level is saying, well, your permit requires you to have a public water supply, and none of these existing domestic wells that you have serving your property meet that code requirement, and that could be a major hangup. So
I would-
how administratively in this package, how would we address that in a motion? If there were a motion to approve, we would just note that absent condition 7.
Exactly. That
Okay.
would be my recommendation.
Okay. That's all my questions for now. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
No, I don't have any questions. I mean, it looks like everything is already laid out and there's a plan for everything, and it's a recommendation of the planning commission to approve it, so I have no questions.
And I have no questions. So at this time, we open the recording hearing to the public for comment.
My name is Brian Cordes. We live 2 miles east of the dairy and 2 miles south of the proposed feedlot. Closer yet? Okay. You want me to start over? Okay. My name is Brian Cordes. We live 2 miles east of the dairy and 2 miles south of the proposed feedlot. And I have a few questions. One thing I'd like to, and I'm sorry, I don't have your name, but Derek, I believe I'm the one who emailed you I've never met you, but I did want to say one thing. Just to clarify, and I hope you mentioned that no one expressed any concern. I did express a concern in that email, and it basically had to do with water and how the aquifers are being drawn down, and several neighbors have had to drill their wells deeper, and so it's just a concern. Okay.
I don't have a control over that.
All right.
That's ecology or the health district or conservation.
Okay.
district, those agencies. That's- so I apologize.
Okay. All right. And I also, I'm here, I'd like to clarify and express a few concerns. One of the other issues is when I talked to you before on the phone the day after the initial meeting, I thought, and maybe I misunderstood, I thought you said that this 10,000 was for the total dairy operation or the total head count for the entire dairy operation.
That's what we were informed.
I talked with Mr. Van der Meulen yesterday, and I don't think that's what he thinks.
It has to be understood. I can only go by what the applicant informs me.
Okay.
I can't second guess or speculate or anything like that. And that was, again, when we read the application, it said 6,500. It was written in such a way, and our communications indicated that initially. Then the day of the hearing, he said, no, it's a grand total of 10,000. And that's what he told us. If he's got other plans to expand beyond that, then he's going to have to come back for a CUP. This is where we're at. We're at 10,000. That's his limit.
That's
That's
including his current dairy.
As far as I'm aware, that's what we were informed.
Okay, that's not what I talked to him yesterday. He was thinking 10,000 just for his feedlot, and he still has, I thought he told me like 8,000 on his current dairy. That would add up to 18,000.
This is the first I'm hearing about.
Okay,
So I can't speak. Again, I can only go by what the applicant informs us
Mhm.
and inserts into the record. So I don't even know how to respond to that, honestly,
Okay.
at this point, because that's not what I was informed. Multiple times of conversation with him, that's how he indicated, was that it was going to be a total of 10. So if he's looking to go beyond that, we may have to bring that back as another item.
that's what I'm trying to understand. Are we talking, does he have one conditional use permit on the dairy part and another conditional use permit on the feedlot? Or is it all one combined
Well, this,
use permit?
well, the
I just want,
intent,
that's what I'm trying to
the
clarify.
intent, our understanding was that was the entire facility. We will have to go back and now double check on that. But again, he indicated, so that would be a 1,500 head increase on his total facility based on the numbers that you've provided.
Mhm.
These are not the numbers that he provided us.
And the dairy separation standard, I'm not familiar with that. I didn't know.
What
if
that
you
is
used-
you, kind of hard. For me, the best reference point actually is in the northwest
Mhm.
quadrant of the county,
Mhm.
where we have we have the Baginski Dairy, I think that the
Mhm.
Cooper, something like that begins. And they're in close proximity to one another. And what it is you're only supposed to have a certain number of head of cattle within so many individual operations. It's
Okay.
not necessarily the head count specifically. It's, you can only have one operation within 5 miles of another operation, these types of things. However, terrain, wind patterns, various other things can allow for those to be closer. So when you look up at Mr. Baginski's property and the Coopers up in, I know I'm saying that wrong, but up in the northwest, you'll see that they're close together, but they've gotten this waiver because of the way the hills lay out, the wind patterns. They don't stack. They don't add together. They're separate. If you smell one, you're only smelling one. You're not smelling the other one, really. That's kind of a gross simplification of how it works, but that's the general idea. And that's something that's granted to the conservation district. So, But no, you could have one facility that has, depending on how many there were, many, many heads of cattle, but it would limit the ability of another entity to start a new one within that range. I believe it's 5 miles of separation, but I could be wrong on that.
So then if I may express our concerns, first of all, I want to state that Mr. Vandermeulen has been a very good neighbor. And even 2 miles away, we seldom smell anything from his dairy, current dairy. And so that being said, this 10,000 cattle on just the feedlot portion, that's a lot of cattle. That's fourfold increase of what it is now. So there's some concern that it's good now, but when you quadruple the size of the lot, that could have implications for flies. I'm glad to see that they have a fly and odor control plan. And also the water usage. It's a concern to us out there. We're dependent on our domestic wells. If they go dry, we're done. And I understand he's pulling out of a deeper aquifer, but no one really knows where that water comes from or how they're interconnected. And there's been so many wells punched through over the years that they drain into each other, at least a certain amount. So that is a concern of ours. And
We also recently found out that there is and this has to do with the Conservation District. He has an application before them, so I believe they're investigating that water situation. They're going to be the ones that determine whether or not it's there or it's okay. Again, that's something that's outside of our purview. So one of the things that's kind of regarding the conditional use permit that should be remembered is you have a right to apply for the conditional use permit. We process the conditional use permit and we give you permission to proceed based on these conditions. But if you can't meet the standards, you can't meet the requirements, for example, of the Conservation District regarding water or the odor and fly control metrics, then you can't finalize. So the CUP is almost like a preliminary step to where we're granting the permission to, or denying, depending on the situation, to go ahead and move forward with that, provided you meet all those conditions. If you can't meet those conditions, then your permit's not approved. But we may approve the CUP if that makes any sense. We're giving you permission to move forward to implement all those things. But if you cannot, due to finances or something else, then it ends up that you just can't meet those standards and you won't be able to proceed. So the CUP process is kind of a preliminary step where we're granting that initial permission plus outlining all the things that you need to meet in order to move forward. That helps at all.
so I'm not adamantly opposed. I'm not necessarily in favor. Want to get some clarification and express some concerns is where I'm coming from. And in the water issue, the problem is if our well goes dry in 10 years, we don't really have any recourse. We can't prove it one way or the other. And so I'm expressing a concern now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Yeah, I'm Case Vandermeulen, I'm actually the applicant. And I'd like to clarify a few things if we possibly could.
Okay.
As far as the, from 6,500 to 10,000, I think it was more a misunderstanding, I guess. At that site or that parcel, we do have a conditional use permit for 3,500. And I asked for an additional permit to add 6,500 to that. Now, I think there was a misunderstanding on how that happened, I guess. So when I got the paperwork for the packet for the week before the planning commission hearing, I called one of the staff and said, hey, you guys made a mistake. And so it wasn't necessarily the day of the hearing. It was a few days before because, anyway, either way, that's the way. I wasn't trying to change anything in midstream. Second, Brian's concern for water. When we got that original permit for conditional use permit for the 3,500 head, one of the requirements was that we drill the well all the way down through the Grand Ron aquifer and case the well all the way to through the Wanapum, so they weren't interconnected, so which we did. So we wouldn't have any effect on the upper water layers. As far as additional permits, as far as the total 10,000 head, we have a conditional use permit for the dairy for 5,500 head or 6,000 head, something like that. Conditional use permit for a feedlot right next to the dairy of 3,000 head, I believe. And then the 3,500 on the north side of the farm. And now I'm applying for the 6,500 head additional to the north side of the farm. So there's a lot more than 10,000 head altogether on the total property. Anyway, that's.
I apologize. Yeah, because you've got the CUP for the south. We'll call it the south, the main,
Yep.
what I call the main facility.
Correct.
This CUP is for this application up here, and what you had 3,500 already approved for an expansion of. So we have the facility and then the property. The facility is the Grand Coulee Dairy operation, and that's the entirety. I don't know how many hundreds of acres, thousands of acres you have.
3,300 acres.
Okay. So this is an application for just that northwest corner.
That is correct.
Okay. I apologize for that. That's just not, we didn't understand that. We still stand by our position regarding it. Because again, it's so far up there. It was already initiated as such, so I don't think staff really changes its position regarding that. It's just that it's in a smaller, it's not the entirety of the site, apparently. It is for the, just that upper area. Again, the parties, most of this regulatory authority is at the state level or at the federal level for compliance that they'll need to meet. And yeah, I just don't. So basically the southern, the 8,500, that's on the existing facility down there. This is up there. That's going to have to be something that's definitely communicated in that separation standard to determine whether or not that's going to cause an issue. But again, that's going to be determined by the conservation district, not us. But that clarification, I apologize for that not being understood. There's just a lot of moving parts on this one, and I think we might have oopsed on that number. So what I'm hearing is 8,500 on the existing facility right now, and then now you're looking for, and then you have 35 already in the north, and you're looking for a grand total of 10 in the north, and then 8,500 in the main complex. You're not looking to change that number, but these animals will move from.
That is correct.
So
And the way I understand it from previous applications is that a dairy conditional use permit is different than a feedlot conditional use permit.
that would be correct.
And that's why we have both in the south and only feedlot on the
Yeah,
north.
your head counts are different and things like that. It's 500 head for a dairy. It's 1,000 head for a feedlot before you have to get a CUP. They are listed differently. So.
And can I add one more thing? I think the separation of, I believe it's 4 miles or 5 miles, that only counts for dairy operations from different owners, I believe. I don't think feedlots are part of that separation, correct?
That's my understanding. Yeah, it's separate owners, not necessarily the same. I'm not sure. It only speaks or it only comes up under dairy operations. It doesn't really, I've never seen a reference of feedlots in that equation, but it'll still be something that needs to be reviewed by conservation and approved that this is all going to
That's
work
correct.
for them.
I'd be gladly to add any more comments or if you have any other questions.
Okay, at this point in time, is there questions by the committee, or is there any other public comment? Keith, anybody on the phone?
Oh, sir.
Okay, so at this point, commissioners, questions?
I have no questions.
Go ahead, Rocky.
I says I have no questions.
Oh.
I think that's quite a list of requirements that he already has to jump through, so I don't think we should hold it back. Questions?
So Derek, we've got a few different issues in this package. We've got some content that wasn't intended to be put in there. We've got some uncertainty about, at least in the package, how many head and where they're dispersed. And I appreciate the descriptions by everyone concerned as to what those numbers are and where they are. So two questions. One, is there a particular reason that you're doing a whole new CUP as opposed to updating an existing one? Start with that one.
It would be the fact that we didn't make the connection, that there's that 3,500 CUP up there. We thought this was a new application on that. So that's how it was processed.
Okay. The information that was communicated to the public initially was a little confusing,
Mm-hmm.
and it affected the DNS versus an MDNS under SEPA, determination non-significance, mitigated determination non-significance. And because of that lack of clarity, you delayed the process and re-advertised it.
Correct.
Is the ambiguity that we've now discovered here today any less than the previous confusion? In my judgment, it's equal or more.
That's, yeah, I mean, it's where we,
And I don't want to pin you down, but
yeah,
part of this process is
It's-
public trust and confidence, and making sure that we're consistent in how we do things, and that people who have a concern or a voice have that opportunity. You've got a tough enough job without having to stand in front of us and get questions battered at you. But had Mr. Cordes not been here today, I wouldn't have had the perspective, and I don't really know why, but the record clearly didn't contain a lot of the, I think, very relevant points that he made. I mean, and Mr. Vanderbilt made a great point. I mean, the aquifers between the Wanapum and the Grand Ronde is substantially deeper, and you don't go there unless you have to because of the cost and salinity and heat and all the other things that come with it.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's all really relevant information here. And so what I'm asking is, do you, I don't want to lead the answer. How do you feel about the completeness and accuracy of the record for us to make a decision on it today, as opposed to cleaning this up and taking another shot at it in a week or two? In particular, you've got a requirement in here for this gentleman to provide a public water system. And that needs to be looked at, because while it might not be a requirement for a public water system, there is a requirement for a potable system.
yeah, I believe that we we being staff, can provide a more clear distinction in the documentations for this, for the record. The fact that, we've got all this, we can go through. I would support, and I apologize to Mr. Vandermeulen regarding the delay. But I would recommend that we come back with a little bit more precise differential showing this is where this head is under this CUP. This is this over here, these types of things, and come back. It's up to the board, obviously, if they feel that, and this is part of
Well,
why
there's-
we wanted it to be an open public hearing, is if there's, so that we can modify the record, if there's sufficient evidence here, or not evidence, but information for the board to make their decision, so be it.
Yeah.
At the same time, staff will completely understand if you'd like us to go back, put something else
Well, let me-
together, re-notify.
Let me make an observation on that. There's an old saying that there never seems to be enough time to do it right the first time, but there's always time to do it a second time. And I get the clear sense that there's strong support for ag and for this proposal by the board. My concern is that we've got a record that is fragment, that has been challenged, that has been brought back publicly once already because of an issue that frankly is smaller than the issues that have come out today. And I think the greatest disservice that we could do to the applicant would be to approve something that has chinks in its armor and would make it subject to easier challenge in the future. I think our duty to do good, solid, completed staff work and public process goes not only to the public at large, knowing what's going on and what we're doing, but it also goes to ensuring that when we approve something for an applicant, they're actually getting what we're approving. And I think and I don't want anybody to mistake, I'm not suggesting that I would ever do this, but let's just say if someone wanted to make life difficult for the applicant subsequent this, I see several ways it could be done with this record. And I think we do him a disservice giving him a fragmented response. Again, I sense strong support in the board, and I'm not trying to signal how people should vote. I'm not suggesting that I'm trying to signal that I don't think that coming back and cleaning up this record anyway changes the outcome. But for long term, if I were the applicant, and I've had special use permits, by the way, so I'm keenly aware. But if it's the will of the board that we go forward with the record that we've got, then I think it's at the expense of the applicant's future security, not the board's. Thanks.
So Case, if I may ask, what will this delay do to your,
Well, I guess I really appreciate the concern. Now, when I went to, what was that, 2011 or 12, when we did the original conditional use permit for the 3,500 on our north side, I don't believe that at that point in time, the dairy or the other conditional use permit was even mentioned or anything like that. So, I guess I can see that. I don't like the delay, and I don't know what this will do, but I guess I agree with being thorough, but I don't like the delay.
so the way I understand it, Derek, would be that we, instead of issuing a new cup, we would just increase the old cup from 3,500 to 10,000? Is that correct?
Most likely, yeah. I have to go back and double check the different CUPs, how they apply, what the total head counts are, all of that stuff, how they relate to one another. Exactly as Mr. Vandermeer. It may be relevant, it may not be, it may be aggregate, it may not be. I've got to go double check on some stuff because we have multiple facilities here that follow the different rule sets, and we got to make sure. For example, in building If I can go to building, I can go to building. And if they're separated, adequate distance, sorry. If they're separated by adequate distance, that's the square footage. But if they're too close, then they become aggregated. And now it's the square footage. So I've got to double check on some of these things. I would personally feel more comfortable, and I apologize to Mr. Vandermeulen for this, but coming back to the board with a corrected record, clarifying and outlining, these are the CUPs on the property in case there is some sort of an aggregate issue associated with one of the state agencies, proximities, these types of things. If it's not articulated that way, I have a concern that folks reviewing the record or reviewing the notices will not have an accurate picture. Then they show up and, well, wait a minute, this isn't what we thought, and creating more actual delay on the ground potentially.
So we already heard that they're not separate operations. This is all the same operation. So I don't know why you got to look at proximity because it's the same operation, correct?
But the different uses are different. So you've got feedlot and you've got dairy. Those have different standards and requirements. And like I said, so that's my concern. I'm not 100% expert on these things. I have to look these things up and research on them, and just make sure that we're not. That's just my preference. Is that when I prepare something and I find out that it's not accurate or it's not necessarily reflecting the entire picture, it puts concern in me in that folks aren't noticed appropriately about what's going on. It may be that when I come back, it's just like these things are separate and they're not together. It's also going to be dependent on the individual jurisdictions also and how they do things.
Let me ask you this. Is it going to have to go before the planning board again?
Not at this point, no.
Can you have this ready for next week? Because I know in farming, timing is of the issue.
Not next week, but the following week, just because I have to get notices out about the fact that change occurs.
Derek, you put your finger on it just in the last 30 seconds. Excuse me. You said where the public was not properly noticed. That's really where we are. And everything about the application can be perfect. But if the notice isn't, anybody, they don't even have to have a direct, relationship to this operation, could challenge the gentleman's CUP. And that's really where I'm coming from, is that we've got a duty to do this right so that when he's got a conditional use permit, he knows that he can rely on that when he goes and buys livestock, when he puts in fences, when he invests money. He needs to be assured that the CUP is legitimate. And even something as simple as improper notice opens the door for challenge. That's the crux of my point.
Yeah. I don't see the mitigations changing. It's just a matter of making sure that all the numbers are right. So they're still going to need to, it's just that those numbers could adjust how, say, the fly odor plan and those types of things are addressed.
Okay, so Derek, was the public notified on this new cup?
Yes. You mean about this hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
So I don't know why there's a problem with an increase in an old cup. If we were going to pass a new cup and we're just going to increase an old cup, all we need is to know the old conditional use permit to increase it at this time, correct? To 10,000 from 3,500? That's all he's asking.
That is within the power of the board.
And he's not buying a herd cattle, I don't believe. He's taking the calves that are born and he's raising those heifers up.
Well, I don't know.
I mean, I'm just saying, usually you build your herd, you don't go out and buy a herd.
Right.
So if you can get us that cup number, I'm thinking that we could have consensus from the board today so that time is of the essence on this. And I don't see any problems here. And I think if we put Mr. Vandermeulen to a 2-week delay, time is money. And I think we're doing him a disservice when we didn't have this all. Did people go out and talk to Mr. Van de Buren before this, or was there any discussion with him to get clarification of all this?
Yeah, but if you're not aware of an issue, you're not going to necessarily ask about it. So it's just, yeah, I mean, I can do that. I can get the CUP, yeah, by the end of the day, and go through all that. My concern is, again, we have due dates that we're required to provide the board with certain things by certain days, and there's so that's why I was saying 2 weeks. I can get the CUP number for that and review it regarding the north quadrant or this area. Yeah, I can get that to the board today.
By the end of the meeting, or should,
Well, I don't have access to my files and stuff like that.
so we'd
here.
probably have to wait until next meeting to pass that and okay it. Because we got to have it in front of us. We don't know what we're passing.
Right,
if we
yeah, I
know
don't
the-
have that CUP number memorized or the conditions or anything else associated with that one out
Well, Mr.
there.
Van de Buren, I believe that's the best we can do is next week, we could have that in front of us to pass. I thank you for your patience. So with that, I don't think we're going to have a motion on this issue. So
We can move to table the record, or you can close the public hearing.
I suggest we close the public hearing until we have the proper identification next week.
I think it's proper to close the public hearing before the board takes any formal actions.
At this point in time, if there's no more public comment, anybody on the phone, Keith?
No, sir.
Okay, so we'll close the public hearing.
I move to table the matter before the board currently, which is CUP 2020-04 and SEPA 2020-11, till such time as the planning department is able to provide the answers to the questions raised today and an administratively complete record that is suitable for board consideration.
I second the motion.
Been motion and second discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, with that, we'll move down to the adoption of the Franklin County Building Code and Fire Code. And Derek, I believe you're up again.
This is, as I was starting to say earlier, every 3 years, the International Code Council updates the building code. There's been a lot of weird delays on this one so it's the 2018 code and we're adopting it in 2021. Long story short, the state adopts it. It has, the state also has amendments and things like that, but as a jurisdiction, we're required by state law to utilize the building code as adopted by the state. Then you adopt that as your local building code and fire code. Both are produced through the International Code Council. The building code, actually, you have the building code, which is generally commercial type construction. You have the IRC, the residential code, that's for residential construction. And then you have the fire code, which provides various fire. Normally, we would do this as a consent item. However, there were some modifications that staff made to the code clarifying 2 items. One, in the fire code, the fire separation standards for rural development, when there's not a sufficient fire suppression system available within 500 feet. That's usually either a public water system with fire hydrants or depending on the thing, but maybe like a 20,000 or some standing water tower or tank that's used in case there's a fire. Well, if those 2 things aren't available, then another method is through structural separation or structural mitigation, meaning you can put in intervening firewalls and stuff like that. So we've already had a practice of doing this at the time of short plat, where we would note that on the plat. What we've done is, in addition to that, is basically made that a requirement. Fire suppression is fire suppression, and fire protection, whether or not it was on the short plat or not. That's kind of the justification for the modification. And in the building code, we clarify how the reissuance or extension of permits would be practiced in the county. It's very similar, and it just clarifies the language that's already outlaid in the building code. Basically, a permit is good for 6 months, 180 days, provided there are inspections or whatnot. If you do an inspection, you can keep extending that out for a grand total of 2 years. Then it starts getting into some other caveats associated with whether or not the building's like exterior is done, and then what you can do then if you're just doing interior work. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions, commissioners?
So we're not making anything that's more stringent upon these new laws, are we?
No,
We're not going further
No.
than what they're asking.
where you're going to see maybe a potential effect is again in that fire separation. Right now, your standard setbacks on a building are 25 foot in the front, 25 in the rear, 10 foot to the side if there's fire suppression, and 10 foot between structures. This is without intervening firewalls or any of the caveats. What we're doing is we're making it so that if that's the case, if there is no suppression, then we've got some plats and short plats that have this clearly articulated in the language, but you may have a lot that has that effect as well that doesn't have that in the short plat language, the notes. So we're saying if you don't have fire suppressions, you're going to have to do increased setbacks and separations. That is a bit of it's a little bit more restrictive, but it's also what the fire districts have requested of us. And it's just clarifying that. So right now we've got a hit or miss situation where if it's on the short plat, you're held to it, or subdivision. If it's on that, then you're held to that standard. But if it's not, if that note's not on there, say it was before we adopted it or whatnot, then you can't be held to that standard.
Well, Derek, even if it's not on the plat, when it comes time to pull a building permit, you're going to be held to it, right?
Now you would be, if this is approved. Right now, the way it's laid out and the language is written and adopted, it only applies if it shows as a note. on
So
a
right
plat.
now, we have a situation by virtue of change in the law where we have two people owning two different pieces of property, and depending what's on their plat, they could be treated very differently.
Correct. That's what currently exists.
So we've got unequal treatment for citizens based on when they got it.
Correct.
These changes make us compliant with new state law.
What do you mean?
I won't go there then.
Yeah, I mean, we're not, the building code, the fire code, all those things, they're what's known as the floor. A local jurisdiction has a right to modify those as it sees fit, as long as it doesn't go below that. This is a minor, in our opinion, pretty minor ask. Usually this is applying on properties that are significant size, that have plenty of room to move things around. There's also other mitigation techniques that can be implemented should, say, the increased setbacks just aren't going to work for the property. There's other things that can be done structurally, like intervening firewalls and various other things. So that's left to the applicant as to how they would like to proceed.
So Derek, I noticed in here that everything is adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code. Can you explain to me what the International property maintenance is? Who are they?
The ICC is, do you mean the International
Yeah.
Code Council? All of this comes out of that, the ICC. So if you see international in front of it, and what that is an American organization. It's a conglomeration. What used to happen is you had regional code councils. Those all consolidated, and they're now trying to get the rest of the world to adopt this code.
Right.
So it's a minimum build standard based on safety, basically.
And I see here that the State Building Code Act gave rulemaking authority to the State Building Code Council. Who are they?
They're a group for Washington State that kind of goes and goes through, and they create those amendments I'd mentioned earlier that Washington State adopts as an amendment. So that's a state agency
Mhm.
that consists of building officials, probably lawyers, and probably state appointees.
And I noticed it later on down here, and I want to emphasize this. The county may make certain adjustments for local administration and conditions.
Correct. And that would be similar to what we've done with those, with the permits. You know, the building code just says permits are good for 180 days. That's what the building code says. We've allowed for extensions. Well, and they say you can't extend it one time. Anything where you're trying to go lower than the minimum requirements, that type of a regulation has to go to that board, the state board, for approval. Or if you're doing something significant deviation from those regulations. So that's the body, and then they'll give you a yay or nay on that.
And I also noticed down here that permit fees are based on the following evaluations, everything based on square footage, and it's all went up.
Correct. That's again as provided through the Washington State, or no, I'm sorry, the IBC. I think is the agency that does that. Those get adjusted, not annually at every code cycle.
Right.
So Derek, as it's noted in the record, we can make, county may make certain adjustments for local administration and conditions.
Correct.
Same line that Commissioner Didier just read.
Right.
However, if we make certain adjustments for local administration and conditions and we don't apply them equally to all citizens, do we not create a position for challenge?
Potentially.
Okay. I mean, set aside the ethical obligation to treat all of our citizens equally. We then run into a challenge where someone doesn't have it on their plat, does A. Someone who does have it on their plat comes in and says, why'd you put it on my plat and you're letting him do this? Why can't I do the same? And therein lies the root of litigation.
Right now, my answer is the rules changed, but that's never a satisfactory response.
Well,
Because that's
except that-
usually what does happen is like, you know, Plat A was
Except
done
that the
in-
rules didn't change between those two circumstances, did they?
Well, that's what I'm saying. When Plat A was done, that wasn't a rule. Plat B was done, it was a rule.
Is that the case here?
That's what we have going on right now, yes.
And what was that change?
You mean, when did we change it?
Mhm.
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'd have to go back, but it was in the 2000s, if I recall correctly. So after 2010, I think, but I have to double check. So we started doing when a plat comes in, we check for water. If there's none available, then we articulate that they have an option of either installing the 20,000 gallon.
Sure. You look at
thing.
water, streets, curb, gutter, sidewalk, all the various issues and current setback requirements.
Correct. So the timing of when the plat was done has a lot to do with whether or not that note shows up on the plat regarding the separations. So
And at some point in the 2000s,
that's my
you say
recollection.
we
Yes.
changed this, and on those plats going forward, it was noticed that you had to have these different setbacks.
Or they put in a water suppression system. That's approved by the local fire department.
So how is that different than grandfathering somebody who is vested on a building permit? So you come in, you get a building permit, and you submit all your paperwork, you meet all the requirements, you've got 180 days, you've got your permit in hand. 90 days later, the county changes the rules. You're still vested or grandfathered under the terms and conditions at the time you got your permit. How is the situation with the setbacks on an older plat that doesn't have the new setback requirements? Why wouldn't that be similarly vested, grandfathered, protected, whatever term you want to use?
Because that the note on the plat is a land use issue.
Right?
This is a building code, and the building codes are updated and changed every 3 years. And you have to meet the requirements of the new code that's in place at the time. This also occurs, say, a 50% remodel.
So it was a code change that required the change in setbacks?
That's what we're doing. We're doing a code change. So that would just clarify it and make it apply to anybody that doesn't have fire suppression. Again,
But what I'm getting to is there wasn't a code change or anything in the 2000s that created this disparate treatment. There would be if we approved this today. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I didn't mean to say it that way. There was a change in the 2000s. This would attempt to, I don't want to say remedy because I'm not sure that it's broken. This would retroactively change those conditions on those previous plats.
not that it would change the conditions on the plats, it's just that it would not necessarily be necessary as a note on a plat anymore. It would just be a standard practice.
Okay.
Again, based on fire separation or fire prevention is really what it comes down, life
Okay.
and safety.
Well, I
And
feel like
again,
we've-
life and safety is one of those areas where, yeah, it can be applied retroactively because it's a life and safety situation.
and this would fall under that category.
Correct.
So Derek, you mentioned land use issue.
Right.
Elaborate on that. What do you mean here?
Subdivisions are land use actions, so
Okay.
it's the rules that we follow the rules as outlined in our case, 16. And I've forgive me, I don't remember off the top of my head the subdivision RCWs, but again, the process used for, whether or not this can be short platted or it requires a long plat or, more than 4 units, these types of things. What the thresholds, all this stuff is articulated in the RCWs. Then we have local nuance, like for example, here in the UGAs, you can do a short plat up to 9 lots, but out in the rural areas, you can only do 4. Then you have to move into a true subdivision, which requires SEPA and various other things. Those are land use actions. The building code involves structures and the safety and the efficacy of those units as to whether or not they meet the minimum safety standards. And that's why the ICC is trying to get this adopted worldwide, because as you'll see in some countries, when certain catastrophic natural disasters occur, it's pretty devastating compared to that same type of event occurring in the United States.
Mhm.
Local nuance and flavor has to do with things like, for example, snow loads. So like our snow loads obviously are much higher than, say, Florida's, but their wind load requirements are going to be much higher than ours because of the hurricane risk. These types of things happen locally, but they're within a framework of what's been developed by the ICC. And most, if not all, states in the United States use the ICC as the metric now, because again, it came out of all these regional bodies. I want to say there were 5 of them. I don't know how Alaska or Hawaii played into it, but in the rest of the United States, they kind of over the years consolidated into one group. There was actually 2, and then one ended up. And so that's what the international refers to, is they put that name on there, trying to get the other countries to adopt this as well, because again, it's minimum safety standards, sound, quality of life issues, these types of things.
Eric, what's the effect or consequence you pick of the county not adhering to various, even though they're labeled international, they're US, international and US building codes and requirements? If we
Well,
were,
we'd be in violation of state law. We're mandated by state law to adopt these. All jurisdictions shall adopt and enforce the Washington State Building Code.
and are these proposed changes underneath that framework?
Yes.
So if we were to not approve these, we would be outside of the IAB, the building codes locally, internationally.
Yeah, and it starts affecting the ability of the party to get their properties insured or mortgages, things like that. An excellent example is, say, tribal builds. So tribes are sovereign from the state. They only adhere to the federal. So they will get their building will be inspected by Washington State Certified Building Inspector, not because they're trying to comply with state law, but because they cannot get financing, nor can they get insurance if they don't have that inspection. So the local jurisdiction does not permit the building. All they do is inspect it to make sure that it meets the requirements of the IBC. Once they get that, then the insurers and the mortgage folks will give the tribe money, as opposed to an engineering spec design, which is what's used by the feds.
So if we don't approve these, an inspector goes out and inspects somebody's property that they're building, and they fail them because they're not meeting this code requirement, or would they say, we didn't adopt them so they don't fail? That's the disconnect, because you're saying we've got to meet.
Well, at this point in time, we've adopted to 2015. So if we didn't adopt to 2018,
So as long as
my
they meet the
assumption,
2015, they'd be
it would
okay.
default to that. Yeah. I have no idea what would happen if we repealed the building code. It would not be pretty, though. I don't know how it would play out, but it's the basis of, well, people wouldn't be able to get their properties. Like, for example, when a home inspector comes in to do the sale, so you're selling your house and you bring in a home inspector to make sure it meets, that's what he's checking. Does it meet all the requirements? If it doesn't, the mortgage company won't finance the building. It becomes, so that's part of it. And then there's also liability associated with you permitted it and it doesn't meet the minimum standards. So that would fall on the county.
So Derek, if we're just needing to comply with the Washington State Building Code Act and the Fire Act, why are we including all this international language when all we're doing is adhering to the Washington State Building Code Act and Fire Act?
Well, what happened is that the Washington Code Council looks at the codes as they come out, and then they make modifications based on what Washington State wants to. In fact, it's pretty significant in Washington State to the point where this is the first year where they actually produced Washington State Code Council, or Washington State's. Well, the energy code is a separate unit now, and then it's a book of changes. So they'll tweak this and they'll tweak that. They'll make this less restrictive, that more restrictive, based on what that group has decided. And then they produce that, and that's also adopted. When we adopt this, we're adopting the state's modifications to the IBC as well as the what's adopted. So in Washington State, the Washington State amendments dictate what interpretation. So if it's been amended, then we go by that. If it hasn't, then we default to the IBC.
So Derek, if we chose locally just not to adopt these state updates, and let's say we made that decision in 1955 today we'd have people who would be subject to the code 1955 that they couldn't get financed or insured. Is that a reasonable explanation of what you said earlier?
Yeah, at a minimum, yeah.
Okay, and so, yeah, at a minimum. And so if you advance that to today, we're simply saying the same thing, it's just in a more compressed time. If we don't adopt the current state codes in the IABC, then it's just a matter of time before people wouldn't be able to pass inspections, get insurance, or get financed.
Correct.
I'm looking for
Anything,
your opinion here.
yeah, anything that's submitted after. Normally this is done in July and they've been moving the date around,
So
so.
the governor accelerated this when he previously. took it.
Yeah, and they took it back and they moved
Yeah,
it forward,
I
yeah.
understand all that, but it's your office that issues the building permits.
Correct,
And you
so,
look to these codes to issue those permits. So would you issue a permit for a project that's not compliant with the current state code?
no.
Uh,
Because we
Maybe
have,
I'm missing something, but I'm not seeing where we have a choice here.
I'm not sure where we're doing that. Like I said, normally this would just be presented to you as a consent item. However, because we made those modifications, I wanted to bring those to your attention.
And the modifications are in the back here where everything's been crossed out, correct?
It's easier to seen in the memo, so,
There's a lot of lines drawn through a lot of language back here.
yeah, this, because this is what's known as it's not a repeal and replace. We're amending, the existing code. And that's for the purpose of, for example, certain items are now, that used to be standalone codes, are now incorporated. So for example, the existing building code. So that was what you would use if you got an existing building. So if the building's before 2018, you go back and there's a process that's out articulated. It used to be a standalone code. Now that's included in the IBC document or the book itself. And when you open up the IBC, it says includes this code, these codes, these codes. So that's why some of those have been repealed. The swimming pool, again, that's a book on what you can and cannot do with regard to safety requirements for swimming pools. Even though it is incorporated in the building code now, we thought that that's a significant document because it comes with notes and interpretations and things like that, that we decided, no, we're going to keep that as standalone and let folks know clearly, we're using this book. Yeah, we use what's adopted in the IBC too, but we're also using this book. So that's one area where we decided to just keep that in there, that it's a separate code, and that's why it's not crossed out. But the other items are all things that have already been incorporated, depending on which version you're looking at, whether it's the IBC or the IFC, where we've crossed those things out. It's because those are now incorporated as part of the code. They're not standalone codes.
Okay. Any more questions, commissioners?
No questions.
And going back to your choice thing, yes, you do have a choice. Those changes that staff recommended can be adopted or disregarded. But the other stuff, I don't really see how we have much of a choice on it.
Okay, commissioners. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make the motion to pass ordinance number 02-2021.
Second.
I believe the motion will be 2021-02. Is that correct, Keith?
Yeah. There's both a 02-2021 and ordinance 03-2021, right?
Yeah. There may be a resolution to enact this, but the motion was to pass the ordinance. And
Okay.
It is an ordinance. It is.
It's an ordinance.
2021-02 for the building code ordinance and 2021-03 for the fire code ordinance.
right. So I think the motion was entirely appropriate, as was the second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 I move to approve ordinance -03-2021 as presented in the matter of Franklin County Code, Chapter 8.40.
Is that the correct motion for the number?
03. Yes.
I second it.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, with that, we're at public comment. Keith, is there anybody on the phone?
I have two callers on the phone right now, and I have one written comment that the author has asked to read, should be read into the record.
Okay, let's take the callers first because they're on the phone waiting.
Good morning. Is this Sharon?
This is Roger White.
Okay, Roger, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Okay, Honorable Board of Commissioners, good morning. My name is Roger White. This morning, I'm here to exercise my diluted representational duties in relation to the Ben Franklin Transportation Authority. My only representation is by way of Commissioners Didier and Mullen. Commissioner Didier, I very much appreciate that you were the only representative from Franklin County attending. No other representatives from east of the river presented. I brought this item forward exactly 2 years ago. First, if the public wants to make comments, they must be submitted in writing 48 hours in advance, which is prior to the agenda being posted. By the way, the February agenda is still not posted. Staff reports are never made available to the public. I sent an email to district administration regarding posting their staff reports and have not heard anything back. What are they hiding? The public hears the word transparency a lot, but we do not see it. Second, administration's priority, transporting individuals so they can get their COVID-19 vaccinations. The general manager indicated that the district was prepared to transport all these individuals so they could be vaccinated. The problem, the district will be only making transportation available to the extremely small local population who do not get their vaccinations at work or at the state's most successful mass vaccination facility, the fairgrounds. In other words, a useless, ineffective program that will not benefit the public. Third, it was also noted that December was this district's best month, despite a 67% drop in ridership. February, a $235,000 profit. I am not aware of any of our local businesses which are seeing positive results from decreased pandemic activity except Ben Franklin Transit. Fourth, the administration maliciously indicated that the district took over evening transport due to bankruptcy of the local taxi service. They failed to mention the bankruptcy was the result of administration unilaterally reducing the contract, not vice versa. Administration indicated that the service was a cost savings to the district. I am not sure which world you live in when the $2 million it costs you to do it internally is cheaper than the $1 million it costs to contract for it. Talk about changing the narrative. Fifth, at its March 11th meeting, administration added significant dollars to the budget. $750,000 for 3 new administrative staff, despite that 67% reduction in riders. I suppose I should appreciate that each administrative employee will cost taxpayers only $250,000 each. Rather than modify the existing administration building, a new replacement was proposed. Unanimous board approval for both. Commissioner Didier, 2 years ago, you indicated changes were immediately forthcoming. The public needs more accountability from that district. The only way to do it is through its board. The public has no say over its tax dollars. The board appears more tributary than it does governing. The board needs to question administration's action. I continue to look forward to the change promised 2 years ago. Thank you in advance for your consideration of this important community issue.
Thank you. The other caller apparently hung up, so I do have just one written comment. This is a letter that came to us from Justin Carey of Pasco. Says, Commissioners, I pray this isn't the only communication you've received on this subject. I am writing to encourage you to stand up against the mask mandate. In your next meeting as the Health Department Board of Directors on March 17th, will you be holding the BFHD accountable to following the new World Health Organization and CDC admission that masks offer no statistical protection against COVID? Dr. Person has consistently stated that the Ben Franklin Health District follows CDC guidelines. Ignoring this, quote, new admission about masks clearly does not follow all previous advice. If she does not relent, are you prepared to speak bluntly? The only reason to continue this mask mandate would be for social control over citizens, of which BFHD would then be openly guilty. The people are behind you and you have the Constitution on your side. Speak truth. Thank you for your time, Justin Carey, Pasco. I don't have any other callers on the line at this time.
Public comment. Anybody in the room would like to say something?
Hello, gentlemen. My name is Chuck Emrine. I'm a county commissioner in Columbia County. Figured I'd stop by and see how the big city runs things. So I appreciate you letting me sit in on your meeting. It's always interesting to see how other counties run their meetings, and it's educational, to be sure. I've met two of you before, Mr. Peck and Mr. Didier and Mr. Mullen. Look forward to the opportunity to talk to you later
Yes.
and see you. But anyway, just want to say thank you. I know it's hard, thankless work. It's kind of complicated by the fact that we have larger entities over us that want us to do things a certain way, and we have smaller entities underneath us that also want to do things their own way that we have to keep heard of. But anyway, thank you very much for your service, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll move down. Nothing more on the phone there, Keith?
No, sir.
Okay. Down to vouchers.
Today, we just have the fund expenditures. I make a motion for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $434,553.44 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
And a motion, a second, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Moves us down, that's a single and only voucher.
Yes.
Moves us down to the consent agenda.
Move to approve consent agenda, 2 items, discussion on item 2, please.
Second.
There's been a motion, a second, discussion.
I've watched carefully over the years how the assessor's office has functioned. It's been my opinion that they are among the most efficient in the courthouse, if not the most, taking on new technologies, software, and done about as much as they can do, in my opinion, to accomplish the work with the small staff that they've got. And my concern, and the reason I bring it up under this consent item, is the idea of purchasing vehicles in lieu of funding the personnel position that I think they badly need. Quite candidly, I think they need the vehicles and they need the position that is long overdue in that office. I won't withhold my support of the vehicles, but I do want to be on record as saying that I think that in an unusual example, this office actually needs the people as much or more than they do these vehicles, but they need both. Thanks.
Would it be appropriate now to ask John Rosenau to come up and explain the purchase of the vehicles and the need for the office staff?
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioners. And I appreciate what you had to say, Commissioner Peck. Currently, we can't do the jobs without the people. We can't do the jobs without the equipment. We have some people. Unfortunately, some of the equipment is not functioning. We have a 97 Jeep that actually was put out to rest by the Public Works Department in 2007. And the assessor's office acquired it, paid for it at that time, has been running it. It literally is not safe nor functional. I drove it myself yesterday. I don't believe that it meets what we need to be safe for the staff. We have two 2005s that are desperately in the need of replacement. So what I'm looking at here is two vehicles currently, which will take 8 to 12 weeks to even get them in. So we've got a time frame out there to even get them from the time we place the order. We've definitely done our due diligence on comparing quote prices between different dealers, the state bid prices versus a local dealer. We can get a cheaper price local dealer, and we'll get some sales tax kickback from that as well. We've looked at through our ER&R. It really is cost prohibitive in comparison to purchasing, and we've looked at leasing, which may be beneficial for the first 3 years, but after that would not be beneficial for the 8 to 10 years that I believe we can get out of these vehicles in life. As far as the position that we need filled, we are in desperate need of that. And on the 30th, I actually was planning on bringing that before the board to try to get them to open up on that one position. The assessor's office did not close down last year, and only for about 6 weeks did we not have full staff in the office. So we're running full bore. I know I've only been in that position as assessor for 45 days. I can tell you the staff is absolutely producing 100% or as near to it as humanly possible with each and every one of them. We have a period of time right now where we're moving into construction appraisal period. Actually, we're already in it to a degree. We need to get the new body in place to where they are getting some of that training to where come next year where we're in that same phase, they've already been trained and they're rolling into it. So I've suggested that we use the first 4 months of that salary to help offset some of the cost of the vehicles. If we get a release today or hopefully in the near future for that position, I would love to be able to get it posted, start interviewing, and hopefully be able to get that person on board as close to after the 1st of May as possible for that body, because we definitely have some intensive training that has to be done to really get them up and going. So it's not like we can just flip a switch and they're functioning at 100% for us, or even 50%. It takes time. Now, if you have other questions more specific to that, our chief appraiser is here, Nikki.
Well, I actually
Yes.
got one just based on what you just said.
Yes.
You made reference to using salary from the first 4 months. Salary from which position? The one that's vacant?
The one vacant position only.
Okay. And
Correct.
so if you were going to fill that come 1st of May, that's 45 days. That's not 4 months of salary.
January, February,
So-
March, and April is the 4 months of salary from the
Okay.
time it was approved.
Retroactive from the start of the year.
Correct.
So the
From
4
very
months,
beginning of the year.
4 months out of the budget. Okay.
Correct. 4
Thank
months out of the budget, including some of the benefits portions that
Right.
Tom worked up through the auditors.
Okay, that's good clarification. Thank you. I didn't think about it being retroactive to the 1st of the year. And if you had a choice of vehicles or the position, is it co-equal in your mind, or is one of them a higher need?
We're not going to be able to complete like we need to complete without the vehicles.
Okay,
It will be an additional strain, probably more so than should be expected of the staff if we don't have the body. So they really are fairly equal in weight.
okay. Well, as I've already said, I think you need both. On your lease analysis, you said beneficial for the first 3 years and then not after that. So I'm assuming you did something akin to a life cycle cost over a decade.
Correct.
And how does the cost in those first 3 years on a lease compare, say, with ER&R or with the purchase? I realize with a purchase, you know, we tend to keep vehicles quite a long time, and then when we sell them, we get little or nothing for them, but we get a lot of life out of them.
I can give you a fairly close breakdown.
Sure.
ER&R would be about $627 a month,
Okay.
plus the purchase price of the vehicle right now, and $627 going forward every month.
Plus the purchase price. of
Plus the
vehicle.
purchase price, because we
Okay.
have to have it up front.
Okay.
That would include fuel and repair and expenses.
Okay.
If we purchase them ourselves up front and then we put in similar to our own ER&R in the department, based on our projected usage and time frame and fuel, we'd be at about $458.
Okay.
If we do a lease, we'd be at about $440 for those are over 8 to 10 years. If we
Right.
do a lease, it's over a 3-year period, we'd be looking at about $440 a month average, because we have to come up with some cash up front, but estimated out over the 3 years, would come out at about $440 without repairs, without fuel. So technically, if we take a look at least an 8-year average program on this, we're money ahead under the current purchase of 2 vehicles.
If you flip these vehicles at the end of their leases, and I'm not a big fan of leases normally, but, you know, we've got ER&R to do maintenance, and that's a costly proposition. I think we all know that, because we've got, you know, municipal employees doing the work, and frankly, they're expensive with all the legal obligations for L&I and everything else. But it sounded like the monthly lease rate, certainly in months where you didn't have any significant maintenance, would be cheaper. And you'd be flipping and having new vehicles every 3-4 years, which speaks to the safety of your people out working independently out in the county. You're comfortable that that's not the best all-in option for the safety and reliability of your fleet and your workers?
If we take a look at the fact that the new vehicles come with 3 years, not maintenance, but warranty.
Right.
And so other than that, you have oil and changes
Sure.
and filters, which is pretty minimal. And I calculated in that to the
Yeah.
monthly cost.
And the leases don't come with any of that kind of coverage or protection?
And they come with the warranty.
The leases do.
The lease does come with the warranty, the same as the purchase comes with the warranty.
So covers catastrophic kinds of things. So really,
Yes.
it's operating costs,
Right.
which you're going to have either way.
Well, except for fuel, it doesn't come with fuel costs. Ours calculated in was fuel, and other minor items that
Okay.
would need to be there.
Well, to be clear, you need people, you need vehicles. I am not normally a fan of leases, but I've seen the aged vehicles that a lot of our staff are driving around the county, and maintenance costs clearly go up significantly in the out years. And it's really hard to
That can
predict
be.
what those are going to be. You lose one transmission on something we own, and the entire plan goes upside down. So I support it either way. I think for future vehicles, you might look at a mix of some lease vehicles and some others, so that you can put your recent model, low mileage lease vehicles out in the field where people are working in, I don't want to say they're risky circumstances. They're not, but you've got an individual out there by themselves, extended hours. A vehicle breakdown can be a problem.
Correct. New vehicles do come with a roadside assistance for 5 years, major engine drivetrain and that for 5 years. So we're fairly confident that that's covered real well. I do want to make it clear, though, that this is for this year. We will have additional needs in the budget for next year that I will be presenting. There's no way that this will meet next year's needs. So I need to be as frank and forthright with you as possible.
Well, when that time comes, the question will be, what do you need more, people or
And-
vehicles?
It'll be both, sir. It'll be both.
I know.
Yeah, to truly do what needs to be done with the growth that this county has seen. And coming from the outside in, I have no preconceived ideas or influence upon what the needs are. I've been able to look at them clear.
Nothing like being in a seat to get a firsthand view.
You definitely get to see it. It's like drinking from a fire hose.
How many miles a year get put on those vehicles?
You know, I'm anticipating up to 8,000. Some of that'll be a little less at times, depending on which phase we are appraising for that year. This year, of course, we will be doing the long distance driving in the North County section. Next year, we'll be back closer to town. The following year, we'll be heading out towards the Colotis area and the drylands, which would be more driving. So it's going to vary. But I believe that until there's more growth and more demand and so forth, that 8,000 would be very, very conservative on our part.
And what's your plan to do with the retired vehicles?
I'm figuring that we can get close to 10 years. Definitely would have to look at it in 8, depending upon additional load and volume, but I'm thinking we can get 8 to 10 years out of a vehicle. I've calculated that will save us approximately $20,000 versus going with the ER&R based on their rates.
And as far as the vehicles that you have now, what's your plan to do with those?
The Jeep in the resolution would be put up for sale immediately. It's in very bad shape. One of the other cars we need both the other cars. We've got 5 appraisers. That would leave us, basically 5 cars, including 2 of them that are 2005s that need some repair work and maintenance work on. And in fact, my plan would be we'll probably end up having to use them to some degree next year, even with some additional and replacement. Yeah.
You made a reference to a timeline about how long it would take to purchase vehicles. Do you need them sooner than that?
Well, there's a possibility they may release one vehicle to us sooner if they still have it in stock. Otherwise, if they have to bring them in, it's 8 to 12 weeks minimum to get the other vehicles.
So when do you need them?
They needed them last year, sir. They really did. They needed them last year.
Right.
So
And that's kind of my point is maybe one of the options is to look at, if you can get the vehicle immediately, to look at maybe a lease option and flip.
part of
the
that
purchase
has to be
next
with
year.
the availability of the lease meeting those criteria without all the leather and all the plushness, which we won't go after and we don't want.
Well, and that's an observation I
Yeah.
hadn't thought of. It may very well be that
Right.
the lease vehicles are not going to be available sooner because most of what they have available to lease is
Correct.
pretty built out.
Yeah, the one that they would lease out, I think we may be able to get possession of potentially, but there's no promises. Like, that's why I said 8 to 12 weeks.
And that, let's call it a built out or a premium vehicle on lease, is that what was reflected in the numbers you gave?
The basic vehicle,
Okay, so the numbers you gave on lease were for a basic vehicle.
absolute basic,
Good.
bare bones, that's all we want. That's
Okay.
all we need. You will see, I won't come to you with wants. I will come to you with really what our needs are.
How long is it going to take to find someone for this position, and how long is it going to take to train them?
Do you have any idea, Nikki? You want to address that? She's definitely more knowing what's out there, the qualifications required.
The timing of the job posting will be crucial. If there's someone trained in our area that's looking for work, it could happen rather quickly. To train a mass appraiser takes 4 years. To move them up to commercial takes another 4. It's a long process.
Right.
They will be working in tandem with other appraisers to learn different methods of the job, but it's all hands on deck training for at least 4 years.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not overnight.
So, Mr. Rosenoff, have you had a chance to do a comparison of Franklin County to like-minded counties as far as personnel in your department, where we're at in comparison, and where are we at with the current employees' retirements and changeover?
I'll start with the latter. We have 3 employees that are very close to retirement ability, whether they choose to retire. Some have voiced that, and others have said, well, maybe I'll stick around another year or 2. I would say we have 3 that very easily could retire within the next 2 to 3 years. Very easily, 2 to 3 people. Primarily, that's in the front office section versus the appraiser section. They're fairly new, younger individuals in the appraiser section. As far as comparing our county, I have the statistical information, and we're barely running at 60% of any comparable county for the assessor's office. We're that understaffed. 60% of any comparable county in the state. Comparable, not those larger ones or other things, but truly comparable. Now, that being said, I don't believe we need that kind of staffing to do the job.
Well, it helps that we're a slow growth county, doesn't
Oh,
it?
yeah, we're slow growth, all right. Yeah. So on the 30th, I'll have some great statistics for you, which you've probably already heard
And
at our
and for anybody
presentation.
listening, that was meant as some sarcasm. We're the fastest growing in the state.
We are. We
and
absolutely
you're already
are.
behind the curve on people, and it's just getting worse every day.
It is. It's getting worse every day. And your point on technology, there's going to be some technology advancements that will assist us. Nikki's got some she's been talking to me about. They're definitely there. They're not going to replace bodies. It's going to help us in what we do to make us better, to be truly more fair and equitable across the county with all of our taxpayers.
Let me ask you this then, on the 3 employees that are within 2 to 3 years of retirement, but would it be worth our while to possibly look into part-time? So we could have 2 people in there training and learning and getting acquainted with the people and their characteristics of their job?
I wouldn't say no, other than I don't even want to use the word caliber, but the willingness of some people to take on a part-time job that would meet the criteria and requirements that we would need for the person for that kind of a job. Might be very difficult to get a part-time body in there to even train on that.
I'm thinking they could work with the current personnel and really pick up some.
And if they were willing to take a part-time position to do that,
Yes.
however, I'll just throw this out to you right now. We don't have the facilities to staff another single individual out there in there. We are working on some options. I'll be presenting them to you. I've brought them to our county administrator. We've definitely got some ideas to present to the commissioners. But at this point in time, I couldn't add one more person out front. And if we fill this appraiser's position, we literally are at absolute max people per square footage, even in the appraiser section.
Yeah. Well, there's no shortage of office space. It takes a 5-minute walk to figure that out and to look at doors between offices. And I think we all know what a rather immediate, simple solution that could be. So
Yes, and we've already, Keith and I have met.
I appreciate that you're
I've
looking
met with
at it.
facilities.
I
and
just
it's-
want to be on the record as noting that that's not a showstopper. That can be fixed tomorrow.
No, that's correct. And I've got definitely some ideas to present to the commissioners.
Yeah.
On that.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Any
What
other
is-
questions?
Yeah, what is the salary range for this new position?
I don't have it in my head, but I believe that it's posted out. It's mid-range on a appraiser 2. Do you know what that range is, Nikki?
Sorry.
I don't have it off the top of my head. I could easily say 60, 65, 70, and it's somewhere in there.
Okay.
But I can't quote you exactly what it is. I do have it in my office, but I just don't have it in the memory bank.
Mr. Chairman, I can pipe in on that. This is Carly. The starting salary for the approved position is $51,300 a year.
51.
51?
Yeah.
51.
51300.
Is that the mid-range of 2, Carly, that was approved, or is that the very beginning?
You are correct. I think it was approved at a step 4, which would be 59.5.
Okay, thank you, Carly.
Yeah. But that would still take approval by the commissioners to hire in at that step.
Correct. So, yeah, right, just almost 60 at this point for that.
All right. Well,
Any other
thank you very
questions?
much. Any other questions?
I have no further questions.
I'd strongly urge you on the resolution, gentlemen, and also the opening up of the position. Thank you.
So today we have only the 2 vehicles in the assessor's office. So we have a motion and a second. Without further discussion, is all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. We're down to administrative office business. Keith?
Yes, commissioners, last week we had an opportunity to receive some update from our attorneys and regarding redistricting. I understand Commissioner Didier wanted to have maybe some further discussion on this item this morning. I did have our graphics folks prepare a copy of a map. This map is the current commissioner districts. There are some recommendations in that from the auditor's office to modify some of the precincts in districts, well, it's actually all three districts, based on some population changes over the past year. But I just wanted to receive instruction from the board on what your preference was with.
Well, that's
moving
why
forward.
I asked for it, is because I think we need to have a consensus of the board of which direction we want to go. I was under the impression that GIS would have the most current.
That's what these are.
Oh, these are GIS? You
Yes.
said auditor's office.
No. The auditor's office, elections has made some recommended changes, based on population shifts. But
By GIS then?
to GIS, and they've incorporated that in the map, but these show the current districts and
Okay.
precincts.
So when you say they've incorporated these in these maps,
Perhaps I should show you.
well, perhaps you shouldn't, because nobody's had the benefit of seeing these in advance of the meeting. So if they reflect our current boundaries and nothing more, I think that's useful. But if it's proposed district boundaries, I think it's appropriate that we have these as part of our read aheads, not dropped in the middle of a meeting.
Okay.
Maybe you could characterize the nature of the recommendations from GIS, auditor's office, whoever made them.
Yeah, that was new to me as well. But these maps were designed to show the current commissioner districts. There are some precincts on the eastern and western edges of the city that have had some changes in population. And I understand that auditor's office made those suggested adjustments, but they don't affect the districts yet, just the precinct boundaries.
Okay, so maybe next meeting, we put that on the agenda and then we can review it and then.
Yes, that's the easy part for me. The more difficult part is what's the direction of the board with redistricting? Are we moving forward with the redistricting plan
That's what I
now?
want to know with.
Or are we waiting until census data is out later this year?
How late? That's
The
problem.
earliest I've heard is August, but I've heard it could be as late as October or November. I don't think the census folks have committed to a particular time frame. And let me say also, the current maps are available on our website.
They are.
Yes, these are just for your convenience if you wanted a paper map, but there's no action expected to take place on this. It's the bigger question is, what do you want to do with commissioner districts?
Would like to hear from the consensus of the board, which direction we want to go. If we want to put together a committee for future, start forming that. If we want to go off of GIS numbers, where are they getting their numbers from, Keith? Where are these population numbers coming from?
They are estimated annually by the state. I want to say the Department of Revenue, but that's not the right department. It's the,
I think it's OFM.
yeah, Office of Financial Management. Thank you. That's correct.
So what are our options right now as far as either going with a commission or having it done internally?
The easiest, if you want to make a change, would probably be to do it internally. You have myself and the GIS coordinator create maps like this with recommendations. Ultimately, the board would have to decide. If you want to create a commission to do this, that would be new, a new area. We have not done that in the past. State law doesn't prohibit it. It certainly could be done, but ultimately, even approving recommendations of a commission would lie with this board. I don't know that you can completely isolate yourself from the process. Ultimately, you have to approve recommendations wherever they come from, whether it's internal staff or some external commission. But we would have to establish how big that commission is, who should serve on it, what are their limitations. I would expect that you would probably want somebody that's reasonably politically neutral, but you would have to make that decision of what their political neutrality may or may not be, and then how long they would be expected to serve. What if there's a rotating basis for that commission? Again, how many do you want on it, and for how long should they serve? And then define the scope of their work and responsibility. Is it for them to just provide suggestions, or are they supposed to come up with a final proposed map that the board then evaluates and votes on. A number of different factors that could be taken into consideration there. I don't know that there is an ideal solution. There are pros and cons to any one of those suggested formats, but again, it's the will of this board what you want our staff to proceed with.
Is there any other counties that have one of these in place?
I'm not aware of another county-based redistricting commission. There's a state redistricting commission for
Right.
legislative districts. That's completely separate from this process.
How is it formed? How do they form that commission?
There are a number of state appointments by different legislative and gubernatorial appointments to that. It's defined in state law. They do have a period of time which they serve. There are certain limitations that they cannot be like a precinct committee officer or a party officer. There's some restrictions on their political affiliation. I don't have, I can easily get those details, but I don't have those right in front of me. But
Oh, I would think it would have to have a mixture of both parties on it.
yes,
I mean, you can't just have one
it's
party
designed
represented.
to be fairly party neutral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that
So my
we,
recollection, though, is that the state has delayed the timeline for the state redistricting based on a combination of COVID and COVID-induced delays in the census data. And I'm thinking it's been moved out at least to the end of the year.
Mhm.
So while we may or may not look to them as a model for a committee, the timelines have certainly changed. There's also the local timeline that we're now within 30 days of the 180-day notice from the potential plaintiffs on this issue. So there isn't time for us to undertake a plan before that 180 days runs out. And I don't know any better than anybody else, but I suspect that we may very well be hearing from them mid-April. I'm not of a mind to think that a redistricting commission is going to be a productive path for us. I think this is going to be probably in the end negotiated with the assistance of our legal counsel, our outside counsel, and the potential plaintiffs, bringing us proposals and recommendations. That's not to say that I won't participate if we want to try and create something locally. But candidly, I think this went out of our hands several months ago, if not longer, which I've been saying now for 3 years. So thanks.
So with that, I tend to agree that it is probably getting short on time, but if we never start, it'll never happen. And I think more importantly than worrying about a lawsuit is we need to make sure that we have something in place so we never get to this point again. And I think time is of the essence. So if we were to form a board, I think it's time that we start looking at how we're going to form that board. Is it going to be a random draw and whether they'll participate? And if they don't, we just randomly draw another person of the voting population. And I think that the sooner we start with good faith, the sooner that we'll have this thing in place, that'll be a good representation of Franklin County and that everybody is represented.
Well, given that it appears we'd be the only ones in the state and there's no format for it, and given the complexities of redistricting and the fact that we're under notice and that, to my recollection, well, I can't speak to something discussed in executive session. I'll just say that it's my opinion that our outside legal counsel would not recommend the path of a redistricting commission that isn't embodied in law. I think it might be prudent for us to have that conversation with legal counsel in executive session, or have our prosecutor's office contact him and ask the question, his advice on trying to create a redistricting commission at this late date, and what the pros and cons of that might be. As I've already said, I think the train left the station a long time ago, and I think this would be effort for naught. I don't see it coming to pass or having a bearing.
Commissioner Mullen?
I prefer the redistricting committee, but I do have to question whether we have enough time to put one together.
Well, timing, obviously, but starting the process is more important. And whether we get it done within the time frame of this proposed lawsuit that is still pending, whether anything is going to happen is really of not of the essence. The essence is that we remove this from the commissioner's drawing of these lines so that there is not even the appearance of this gerrymandering that we are worried about. And I think a commission would be a cross-section of our county that would be all-inclusive, both parties, all the ethnicities of this county, and we try to bring this together and have a common sense approach and remove it from the commissioner's hands. Now, I think that is of more importance than worrying about this lawsuit that may never even happen. I think that the commissioner's drawing the lines does have a appearance of trying to aid in representation, and that needs to be removed from our hands.
I would agree with that.
I don't have any issue with the last remark, but the fact of the matter is, as has been said several times, you cannot remove this issue from this board. Ultimately, it comes to us. It has to be approved. It can only be done at a meeting where all three commissioners are present. And, the fact of the matter is that the buck stops here. And at a minimum, I would urge the board to get a read from our outside legal counsel, who's got deep knowledge in this specific area. This is the core of his practice, and get his read on how this plays or doesn't with respect to the notice that we're currently under, whether this is timely and shows good faith, or whether that train is as I believe, it's already left, and get his take. We're paying him good money for his advice. We ought to at least hear it out before we set on a path. And as for the notions of how this committee ought to be established, representation from different political parties and this and that, none of that is in law anywhere. And I think it just is ripe for the opportunity for challenge throughout the process. I just don't see it being a productive path. But I do agree that we can find someone to propose district boundaries, and I'm not opposed to the notion of giving our outside counsel direction on what our goals and objectives are, like comply with state law, try to the extent that we can, address the concerns expressed by the potential plaintiffs, et cetera, and then have him consult with GIS or somebody to draw some lines. I'm fully on board with that. I have no desire to draw any lines on a map, especially at this point. But I don't think a one-off citizens commission in the state of Washington to try and draw these things, as contentious and as complicated as the matter is, I don't think that's the right path.
Any other discussion, Commissioner Mullen?
I think we should discuss it with the attorney and find out exactly what his views are and his recommendations are. But again, I strongly think we should have a redistricting committee and remove our hands from the process as much as possible.
And the removal of our hands will be from the drawing of the maps. They will
Correct.
present 3 maps or whatever we ask, and then we would pick one from those, which would take us away from the ability to move lines in a particular fashion or mode. So I am in agreement with that also. And I think at the meanwhile, I think personally, we should just look at the map that GIS through the Auditors Board has drawn up and look at it objectively and see what they put together. If that's the consensus of the board, I guess it's out on the website already.
Well,
Not this map.
the current map is out on the website, yes.
The current map, not
Yes.
this map.
I don't think the changes from last year, the population changes, I don't believe they're on the website map.
Okay. So all this is a population change of certain
Yeah.
precincts
Yes.
and not any,
There's no recommended changes. to our
there's no
commission
drawing of
districts on
lines.
this.
It just shows more accurate population. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. All
So I'd
right.
like to see it too, and I think discussing it next week would be fine. I think you used the term, well, yeah, I won't go there.
All right, well, are you instructing me to have that conversation with the outside attorney? Or from my perspective, it seems like that ought to be a conversation that the entire board has
Yes.
with him.
I think the entire
So
board, if we can get them on the phone.
scheduling a session with him next week.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'd recommend that if board members have specific questions that we'd like him to address, that we provide those to the prosecutor's office well in advance of that meeting so that the attorney can be queued up with what those issues and concerns and questions are and be prepared to answer them.
That would be fine and dandy, but if a question arises in the mind of the commissioner during the meeting, then he won't be prohibited from asking that question.
Of course not.
Thank you. Okay, with that, Keith.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Didier, Chairman Didier.
Yes.
One thing, if the board would like, I could certainly reach out because I know sometimes coordinating schedules with our outside counsel can be a challenge. If I could work with Keith on coordinating some of the questions consistent with the conversation today, that might be beneficial if he is not available next Tuesday, just so that the board would have the direction or guidance consistent with the discussion today. We could reach out and certainly ask those questions. If the individual commissioners have issues, you could speak with myself or Ms. Johnson, and we could kind of coordinate all that in the meantime. That way we're not waiting essentially a week, then getting the information, making a decision, then continuing out. If we want to expedite taking some kind of action, we can begin that process consistent with the discussion today, if the board would like us to do that.
Well, thank you, Sean. And I do believe that question was already posed to our representation about this committee in executive session, and he's already responded to it. So I remember that conversation and what he said, and this is why I'm thinking it's probably good for us to pursue a committee, start formulating one. So yes, please reach out to him, see his availability. Would like to have him on the phone next week if possible.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay.
An item that am I okay to move on to the next item?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Last Friday, I believe it was, the Biden administration approved the American Rescue Plan Act. That is a little bit different than the CARES Act that was done last year at the start of COVID. In this Rescue Plan Act, there is going to be a direct allocation of funds to counties. And right now, it appears that the allocation to Franklin County is in the neighborhood of $18.5 million. That is a significant amount of money. There are restrictions on how it is used, but not all of those restrictions have been clearly identified. We're expecting some guidance from the Department of Treasury over the next 60 days on what the limitations are. It's generally like the CARES Act funds. It's designed to respond to the COVID crisis. This has a longer horizon on it. It has to be used by December 31st of 2024. So we've got a couple of years to use it. We get half of it within 60 days of an agreement with the Department of Treasury, and the other half no sooner than 12 months later. So it would be a year. Basically, you're looking at $9.5 million this year and another 9.5 next year.
It'd be 9.25.
Correct. There's some additional funds that will be available for health districts. There's some discussion around PILT that I don't have final answers to yet. We are a county that receives Department of Energy PILT funds. Most of the time when people are talking about PILT funds, they're talking about Department of Interior monies that go to counties that have forest or BLM ground. And ours is more the Department of Energy up at the White Bluffs area, federal land in the White Bluffs National Monument that we receive annual PILT payments for. So I'm still working on that angle, but the PILT was specifically included by Senator Wyden that allows it to be used for any proper governmental purpose except for pension systems. There's a number of states and counties across the country that have underfunded pension systems, and it was specifically restricted that they cannot use these funds to shore up their pension fund. They figured that was a management decision by those boards and counties and cities and states. The federal government was not going to absorb that, those shortfalls. So the long and short of it is I'm on a call later today, I think 4 o'clock today, that we'll talk with the WASAC folks about the limitations on how we can use those funds. But I want you to be aware that that has now been signed into law, and we anticipate moving forward with programs to allocate those funds to businesses in Franklin County, individuals that may have COVID impacts that we haven't thought of yet. But there are some county things as well that it might be appropriate for us to take a look at these one-time funds to use for shoring up some of our areas where we haven't been able to do in the past. So I don't have a lot of answers in the details yet. Those, like I said, this was just signed into law on Friday, even though I've been talking about it with my counterparts across the state for several weeks now. There's still some unanswered questions that we'll get to. Wanted you to at least be aware of that.
So can some of that money be used for our infrastructure, like our bridges and roads?
That remains to be determined, but the short answer is that's likely that could happen. The intent of Congress being translated to what the rules are from the Department of Treasury has not been clearly met yet. I think there's an expectation, a desire on the part of Congress to get this money flowing into the economy. And if there are appropriate public works projects that are what they call shovel ready or close to it, there is a likelihood that we would be able to use some of this funding for those purposes. I don't want to make that promise. I don't want to commit to that course of action until I know for sure, but that discussion and that question is being asked, and it's occurring now.
Okay, good.
So we will have better answers for you, and then an opportunity to have this board, decide priorities, how we want to allocate those funds.
So you mentioned the Department of Energy, Department of Natural Resources is federal too, isn't that?
We typically refer to the Department of Natural Resources for the state agency of DNR.
Okay.
The organization, for example, that owns property out along 182 north of Chapel Hill, that's the state DNR.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the Department of Interior manages
There you go.
BLM and Forest Service lands.
Yes.
When the forest or the logging industry was impacted, this was started a number of years ago. Those counties were heavily dependent on property taxes from those lands to fund their schools. And so when a lot of that economy fell through, the federal government picked up this program of payment in lieu of taxes for federally owned land in those areas, and the Safe Rural Schools Act that put federal money into keeping those schools from having to close. We, on the other hand, receive payment in lieu of taxes for the federal land that's in Franklin County, which is mostly associated with the Department of Energy, the federal program that runs things out at the Hanford site. John has been closely engaged on those PILT payment questions. Peter and Steve before him, working with other counties in our area that are affected by Hanford PILT payments. So it's a topic that we're all engaged in.
Okay.
All right. I have, it looks like 3 callers on public comment, and then I would like to ask for a brief executive session.
Okay.
Hi, is this Vanessa?
Yes.
You have the floor for 3 minutes.
I'm sorry, I have what?
You have the floor. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I am calling regarding the vacating the property for 4612 West Strady Street. We had paid and submitted a form to vacate it because we're subdividing. And the engineer actually told us to do that because there's no way that a road could be built there and we needed to subdivide. So we had paid to submit the form, but they stated in the hearing that there was no reason to vacate it. But that would be the reason, and that's what we put on the form when we submitted the form and paid for it. Because it's a cul-de-sac. And then if you were to build a road through that, it's going to go through all of the neighbors' property, and you wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay. Typically during public comment period, we don't engage in a Q&A. The board did not take action on that vacation of right away today. So I will take your comments back to the planning department and we can evaluate that comment. Thank you.
Okay, how will I hear back?
You would reach out to either my office, this is Keith Johnson, the county administrator, or to Derek Bratton in the planning department.
Okay.
Thank you.
County admin. Okay, thank you.
Keith Johnson, the county administrator. Good morning, Lawanda.
Yes. Good morning, gentlemen, or it's almost noon. This is a long meeting. Hey, I was just calling about the redistricting commission. I think it is a very wise thing to do, especially with the very fact that there is a pending lawsuit, because if you gentlemen choose poorly, it's still going to be a lawsuit. And you can't just capitulate to everybody's whims because they threaten a lawsuit. You have to look at the county as a whole, and every citizen and occupant is as important as the other. And by having a redistricting commission, it shows a good faith action that I think any judge, any jurist would look at and say, you know, it looks like the county is trying to do something in good faith. And I understand evidently that no other county has done this, but it really shows wisdom on the part of our commissioners to do this in an area that is growing expeditiously, because you're going to maybe need this in another 4 years. You know, if our county continues to grow at this rate. So by seeding one, you will always be able to involve the community a lot more. Because if you look at the way the legislative, the way the state does it in redistricting legislative districts, you know, they have it so that every area chooses different people, and And there's rules, that they can't be someone who worked on campaigns. And I think that's important. But it actually is a good representative of the ethnicity and the occupation and the things that will really affect people that an attorney, although they know the law, they're not going to be able to really understand the flavor of the community if the community isn't completely involved. And of course, then those maps, as Commissioner Mullen and Commissioner Goodyear, understand, is that that the final say is the commissioners. But all the recommendations, all the study, all the looking at the actual data will help give wisdom in that choice and not just a reactionary decision, which never ends well for anybody. And I know that I want to hear from the Hispanic community. I value them highly. And as it is estimated, they are 60% of our community. They should be having a great say in this. And so I really think it shows wisdom on the part of Commissioner Mullen and Commissioner Goodyear. And I think the community would be completely behind you, as well as some of the people that are maybe named in that lawsuit. So that is my 2 bits, and I appreciate you gentlemen and your hard work. Thank you.
Good morning. Is this Sharon?
Hi, this is her.
You have the floor for 3 minutes, please.
Okay. Hi. I want to ask what the commissioners have been doing to address the fact that Latinos are underrepresented at the at-large system in order to, voter suppress. And while you answer this, I would like to ask you to please put aside your biases and put in policy above that, because the commission has been known to be quite biased against POC. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's it?
That's all the calls. Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any other public comment? Okay.
I'm a little concerned, Commissioner Peck. You said that no other county uses a commission to redistrict. Is that correct?
That was based on comments from our county administrator's research that we weren't aware of any.
Well,
I'm just
we
not aware of
only
one.
redistrict by committee, and I have no other county that the commissioners actually sit down and do it. I think that hot potato, I think every commissioner would be wise to avoid with a 10-foot pole. If we were to sit and create our own districts, that would be about as untoward as I can imagine anything to be. I know of no other county that does what you're talking about doing. Now, as to the proposed maps, the 2019 proposals on your website, how did you do that without census data? The 2019 proposed districting maps that I saw, I was wondering, because we can only do it by RCW after receiving the decennial census information. And so you've got a 2019 districting map up there proposed. Where did that come from, that census information?
That information comes from the Department of Financial Management at the state with.
So that's
annual
not created by census information or with
Correct.
RCW, correct?
Correct.
All right, well, that's my only question, because I do know that it is a committee. We do use the auditor, the assessor, the GIS, and we use members of each political party as they do at the state level redistricting.
So it's not a citizen committee, it's a staff committee.
It's citizens insofar as that members of the political parties are involved. But it doesn't matter, because just like when you talked today about the adopting the fire code, it's not something that you create, but you still have to adopt it. Same thing with this redistricting. You can accept the redistricting map from a committee, just like you can accept recommendations from departments about things. You are still, of course, overall responsible for anything that takes place. This is the fun of the position. But in no way, shape, or form would I ever want to be responsible for redistricting my own committee or my own district and then have to sit and tell people, just like I wouldn't want to vote myself a raise and not have to stand for it before the next election. So these are things that I would recommend you highly use a committee. And I don't know how you missed out on committees. I could run you down through the South Snake, and committees are the way to go.
personally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other public comment? Okay, hearing none. Keith, you said an executive session?
Yes, I would like a executive session under RCW 42.30, paragraph 1101F. And I would ask be up to 30 minutes with the possibility of coming out early, like the members of the board, myself, the clerk, and Sean Sant and Jen Johnson from the PA's office, and Carly Ney from HR to be able to participate in that executive session.
Thank you. And with that, we will the room to clear and go into executive session. Derek, would you mind closing the door? Just Okay, we have come out of executive session with no decisions being made, and we are back in our regular scheduled meeting. Is there any other further business? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website at www